Hello, and a very warm welcome to the late breaking F1 podcast presented by Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking, as we preview the third race of the 2024 F1 season, the Australian Grand Prix. The weekend where you get to laugh at us Europeans. That's what we like to call it.
Yeah, we love our little lyings, do we, us Europeans? And God, do we moan when we have to get up before 7 in the morning? But God damn it, I'm gonna moan when I've got to get up before 7 in the morning. This is catastrophically early, so enjoy yourselves down under in the land of the Oz, and anyone else that is, of course, watching from Asia. You shall have a lovely time while we struggle through the dark night sky and watch some Formula One.
To be clear, we have no reason whatsoever to complain. We understand that. Before you get angry at us, we get it. We're very privileged here in Europe. We just like to have a moan, that's all.
We're British. It's what we do best.
Exactly. And where's Harry?
I think he's flying down to Australia so he can wake up at an acceptable time, because that man, as previous history in our friendship would show, loves waking up as late as possible.
Slight variation on that. He's gone to Australia to pick up Kirsty and bring her back because we be struggling.
Please, Kirsty, we need a social post. So if you could come back.
Honestly. And I mean, there's no soundboard tonight. We've got a second soundboard. It's not currently working. We've got a kind of mangled, weird solution, if you can call it that, for tonight. I don't know if it's going to work.
It's not good. There's about 8 different things recording us at the moment, folks, in hopes that this doesn't fail.
We've got backups on backups on backups. It's great.
In theory, though, you're getting a show.
Exactly. And you don't want to hear us blab on about how we're giving you the show. You want to hear the show itself. So we've got Fact or Crap coming up a bit later on. We are, as usual, asking who is under pressure going into the race. A little bit about the midfield pack and who might be poised to break clear of that pack. But we're going to start out front, or at least to a team that might want to be somewhere close to the front, which is Mercedes, who have somewhat struggled in the first 2 races of this season. They have 26 points after the first 2 Grand Prix and no top 4 finishes. Folks, that's the first time that both of those things have been true since 2012. You have to go back a long, long way until you find a first 2 races where Mercedes have struggled quite so much. They have said as well that there are going to be experiments for this Grand Prix coming up. So Andrew Shovlin, who is the trackside engineering director, has said the team is designing experiments for the Australian GP weekend in an attempt to solve some issues with the W15. Sam, do you think this is encouraging that they are trying this sort of thing, or is it discouraging to the point where they still might not quite fully understand this concept yet?
What is going on with this team? I think this is absolutely atrocious from Mercedes. They are 8-time Constructors' Champions, 7-time Drivers' Champions, of course, if you include Rosberg in there, who never gets a mention, but deservedly should. And they're coming to the 3rd race of the season, and they've openly said, we don't know what to do with this car. We don't know how to make it better. So we're just going to make stuff up and hope we see either a good thing or a bad thing happen in relation to it. So worrying, I think. As much as it's great that, yes, they're coming in with experiments, they've kind of got to, because if they don't come in with experiments, they won't do anything to this car. They've come out and said publicly they don't know how to improve the car. They don't know the direction they need to go in. They do not know with any certainty what it is that's wrong with the car. And there have been a few whisperings from the design team at Mercedes that Formula One maybe should never have gone with ground force, aero force, whatever it's called, the ground force technique to the car, to make sure that the downforce is supplied under the car rather than the previous on top of car ground swishing into the floor type stuff. Now, usually, people that come out in Formula One moaning tend to be the ones that aren't doing very well and haven't got a solution on how to get good, son. So, yeah, they need to turn it around. And the reason that they are trying to turn it around is because they've got a massive reputation on the line. The company is worth billions and billions, and a lot of that resides on their Formula One success. And they're falling down the order massively. Last season, they were overall the second fastest car, only just if you look at the points tally. The year before, they were very much the second fastest car, but Ferrari pipped them to it for the first half of the season. And then, of course, they had their constructors winning titles. But now, arguably, they're at least 4th fastest, if not joint 5th fastest with Aston Martin if the car keeps improving and Lance Stroll steps up. So experiments at the bare minimum is what I would expect from this Mercedes team. Arguably, it's not good enough. I don't understand how your data scientists, your analytics team aren't able to interpret the data in a correct format. If you've recognised that the data you were given was incorrect or wrong, you must surely be able to understand what data is going to be correct or needed, right? To be able to see what's wrong, you must understand what is right, I believe. And they don't seem to know that either. So it's a really confusing predicament they're in. They're having to bring something to see if it works, but it kind of just feels like they're shooting in the dark and there's a small chance they might hit something and take a step forward. It's not looking good, Chief.
It's not looking good, Chief. Love that. Absolutely love that. Yeah, I know what you mean, though. It's tough. And again, they've really struggled to this point. Even in comparison to the last couple of years, they're behind where you would expect them to be. And look, I think given it is a new concept, I think an adjustment period is understandable and it's acceptable. But maybe I'm just being too nice to them. You know, we look at Red Bull and they've gone fairly radical versus what they did last year. We were all very surprised at the beginning of this season when Red Bull went in a different direction to what we were expecting. And, you know, they haven't needed, at least from a fan's perspective or as an onlooker's perspective, they haven't needed any time to get to grips with this new concept. They've been there from the off. If you haven't noticed, they've been quite good. They've got a couple of poles, couple of wins, couple of second places. I don't think you can ask for too much more than that. So maybe I am being too kind here on Mercedes when I say that I should give them a little bit of time to figure this out. But I can understand why they are experimenting. It's been super close so far this year, outside of, you know, the top 2 teams, I guess you could say. You know, the gap between certainly themselves and McLaren is very, very close. And even those 2 teams to Ferrari, I don't think is a massive gap. And then you've got Aston Martin, again, not too far behind. So you are getting to a stage here where small improvements, as maybe a result of this experimentation, could yield really great results. Bear in mind that they're already 23 points behind Ferrari. So, you know, you can't allow this to go on for too long. But what is clear is that, at least at the moment, they're not at one with the car. And that goes for the drivers, the team itself. There hasn't been this transformation that was maybe unrealistic, but at least we've only got 2 races so far. But in both of the first 2 races, they've gone in, the 2 drivers have gone in completely different directions on both occasions in terms of strategy and in terms of setup. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton very rarely come to a race with the same idea of what they want the car to do. And as we've evidenced from both races so far, it hasn't mattered all that much which way they've gone with it. So, yeah, it feels like 2022 in that regard, right? When we had Lewis Hamilton experimenting nearly every single weekend because he wasn't able to get out the car what he'd like to. It feels like we're not too dissimilar from that situation. So, yeah, I mean, by all means, go ahead and experiment. But I don't know. It feels like they need to get up to speed quickly. How long can this sort of testing period go on for?
Surely not long. Surely they can't be dragging this out for week after week after week, race after race after race. Because if they're going to... That's assuming that Mercedes believe they can get anything out of this season. That's assuming that they are hoping that, you know what, it's already gone. And it
something.
might be. Yeah, something, hopefully.
What counts as something? Like, is that a race win again, like they did 2 years ago? Is it multiple race wins? Is it second place? Like, what... I guess, what are you looking for from the season?
I guess with how they bounced so far back, I'd like to think that recovery looks like, I don't know, by the summer break, they're the second fastest car again. Or at least they're regularly interchanging that with Ferrari, and it shows that they've taken a step forward once again. If they can move past McLaren and comfortably away from Aston Martin, okay, they're moving in the right direction. But what happens if they get to that point and once again they go, we don't know though. We just don't know what comes next again. It feels like unless Mercedes have this absolute engine superiority without an absolute cash cow that they can milk when they the pay cut at the top there, you know, the cash cap at the top there, is not in place, if they don't have access to that, it feels like they haven't got the ability to go out and spend their way to success. And this is something that a few years ago, when we had the likes of Racing Point or Force India as they were before that, when they were already succeeding on such a small budget, it was teams like this that we thought would start to thrive. Equally, I didn't think Mercedes, who spent, 4 or 5 times the cost cap year after year, well into 500-600 million territory on development of their car, which is huge money. I didn't think they'd fall this quickly. Obviously, you think you'd see a balancing of the powers, but I didn't think it would fall this quickly to the point where they are closer to, I argue, the 4th or 5th place team than they are to the 1st place team, which is such a change in over 3 years. So, yeah, I guess that by the end of the season, 2nd fastest team. It's got to be for Mercedes. You have such high hopes for them. You have such high expectations for them. Toto Wolff and that management team does as well. And it'll be a real failing on their aerodynamics team, on their entire research team, and the management as a whole if they cannot start taking strides back towards Red Bull. Surely there's other people who are smart enough at developing a car. It's not just, Adrian Newey in this world. Yes, he's an absolute messiah when it comes to aerodynamics and air particles, but other people are equally very, very good at their jobs, and they need to start exploiting that. And if it's not good enough, be more cutthroat and go out and get someone who is good enough, because your team expects wings, and I expect them to be running towards the front again come the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think if you're at least looking directly ahead of them at the moment, technically they're 4th behind McLaren at this stage, but if you're looking at Ferrari in 2nd, it's not like Ferrari have had the dream start to this season in that, Charles Leclerc struggled in Bahrain to an extent that we weren't expecting. And then last race, of course, Carlos Sainz on the eve of the race is unable to go ahead and do it, and they have to bring in a reserve driver. Ferrari have already had to overcome some adversity, some of which they could do nothing about in the instance of Carlos Sainz, and some maybe they could have done in Bahrain. But point being, it's not been smooth for them. And they are over 20 points clear of Mercedes at this point. And Mercedes can't really say, well, this hasn't gone our way or this hasn't gone our way. It's just been, you haven't had the pace. Like, Lewis Hamilton, despite the fact that he, in Saudi Arabia, the safety car did not go his way. The same with Lando Norris. It's not like he finished that far different from where he qualified. Like, he qualified 8th and finished 9th. Like, it's not like he qualified 2nd and finished 9th, and we could say, well, the safety car really cost him. He finished where he started, roughly speaking. And similarly in Bahrain, again, Lewis Hamilton was in the bottom end of that top 10, and that's where he qualified. So they are very much, I don't know, finishing where they deserve to almost, which should be a concern for them.
Yeah, massively. And the same goes for George Russell, right? It's not like he's making huge strides throughout the field when he is starting his races. He qualified in front of Lewis Hamilton for the first few Grand Prix this season, but he did benefit from the safety car incident that happened at Jeddah, but not particularly, right? He finished ahead of Ollie Behrman. Great. Couldn't catch up to Fernando Alonso. Lost out to the other McLaren, who also benefited from the safety car. So he was the worst of the top 6 who all benefited from the safety car situation. And then right behind him was Ollie Behrman, who, whatever, do what he wants, still managed to be the only car behind George Russell. Lando Norris gets affected by the safety car. Lewis Hamilton, affected by the safety car. So he was the worst of the people in the best position. That Mercedes is just not quick. It's not good. The thing you used to be able to rely on with Mercedes was their consistency. Okay, they might not be the outright fastest, but they regularly be able to knock out result after result after result. 3rd place, 4th place, 3rd place, 4th place, all the time. And that was what would pull them ahead of the likes of Ferrari, McLaren, even Aston Martin. But now, it looks like both drivers, regardless of how they set up their car, whether it be for qualifying or for the race or the strengths they have around the track, they can't seem to break into the top 5. They can't seem to actually take the fight to the likes of McLaren, to the likes of Ferrari, to the likes of Red Bull, who are so far ahead. And currently Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, isn't exactly far off that fight either, in a car that probably is inferior. So it's big worrying signs. Are we on the verge of apology letter gate 2.0?
They can't put Mick Schumacher through that again. Can't happen.
Shaking his head at another camera.
I'll tell you what, though, because it's not like the last 2 years have been great for Mercedes. They have been somewhat similar to what we're seeing so far this year. But one thing that has been consistent across 22 and 23 is that they've been pretty good at Albert Park. So 2022, they finished third and fourth there. So that wasn't their first podium of the year. But when you think about that was actually the Bahrain Grand Prix, if you remember, Hamilton got third in that race. But that only came about as a result of both Red Bulls retiring very late on. So you could almost view Australia 22 as the first true podium that that George Russell got on that day. And then last year, of course, Hamilton finishes second. I know George Russell DNF, but Hamilton had good pace at Australia last year. And in fact, in the first 6 races of last year, their only podium was at Albert Park. So, point being, if they are experimenting this weekend, if they experiment too much, this feels like it might be a good opportunity for them to pick up some momentum that they didn't have in the first 2 races. Are they going to waste it? I don't know. It's just an interesting one. They've had a few circuits like that over the last couple of years. Spain is another one that sticks out. Just is their car's not clicking with every track, but Albert Park has the last couple of years been all right for them.
Yeah, the biggest factor is that the drivers don't know how to set up the car. And when you've got someone as experienced as Lewis Hamilton and someone who is, basically born into these current conditions with the cars that they are with Mercedes, the fact that they're going in completely different directions with a whole team behind them and they're still thinking that they're setting up the car the best way, it just shows that realistically, both sides of the garage have no idea what to do with that car to extract performance from it. Is there performance? Are they literally both getting the most out of it? But actually, it is just the fourth-ish fastest car, and 6th place is arguably the best they can ever get.
I just want to quickly focus on Ferrari. Apparently, Red Bull were just sort of saying they'll be out front. So we've decided to focus a little bit further back. With Ferrari, I guess 2 main questions for them. Firstly, what expectations do you have of Carlos Sainz? Do they change whatsoever thanks to a missed race? And secondly, based on the struggles of Mercedes at this point in the year, we know Mercedes was very close last year. How important is it that the team builds as much of an advantage as they can early in the year?
With Carlos Sainz, I'm feeling sympathetic for him, of course. Someone going through appendicitis and having their appendix removed is incredibly stressful. And I imagine that if I was going through it, I'm not sure I'd be able to turn up to my job next week and expect to perform exactly the same. That being said, he does take part in a competitive sport and no one is forcing him into that car other than himself if he says he's ready to do so. If he's ready to get into that car, I expect Carlos Sainz to be able to drive to his current ability. I expect him to be able to perform as right, otherwise he shouldn't really be doing the job that he's expected to do. It's very different, doing what we're doing, where I'm sitting behind a desk talking into a camera and driving around at 200 miles an hour with 5G being applied to my body multiple times a lap for 2 hours straight, multiple times across a weekend. That is 2 very different jobs, and if Carlos Sainz says to Ferrari, I can get back in the car, I'm ready to go, then I expect him to be able to turn up and go, I'm ready to go. So, yes, I'll be sympathetic, but, when I say my expectations are lowered, it's not by a lot. I expect Charles Leclerc to beat him, but I very much expect Carlos Sainz to be in that hunt, to be, maybe a position, maximum 2 positions away from him if the race goes to plan. He's got to pull his weight it's a little bit less weight. There's no issues there, I suppose. Bit of weight saving. But he has got to pull that weight for Ferrari still. They're in a championship fight. And you're right to ask the question, do they capitalise early? Yeah, they're going to have to. You have to take all the points off your competitors that you can get. And if Mercedes don't know what they're doing, equally if McLaren haven't found the form that they left last season with, and Aston Martin are still running around with one arm behind their back, they have to maximise the downfall of their competitors in any way that they can. That's sport. You have to take advantage. So if Charles Leclerc can stick it on another front row and then maybe finish 3rd, if Perez and Verstappen run off along the field, and maybe, let's say, Carlos Sainz finishes 5th, I think that's a very, very strong weekend for Ferrari, given the circumstances that they've had to go through in comparison to the competitors that they're fighting with. That will be a strong weekend. They have to make sure that they are being ruthless with taking points off of their competitors, because you never know what upgrade someone's going to bring. We've seen it before where cars can bring an upgrading. Aston Martin last season were a prime example. You bring an upgrading over the summer break and you go from scoring podiums every other Grand Prix to finishing outside of the points with both cars and you not having a clue what to do. I'm not saying it'll be that extreme, but it can go the other way. What happens if Mercedes do unlock something and all of a sudden they go, oh, we're only a 10th off Red Bull now, we're flying. They need to make sure they capitalise. So be ruthless, go out there and score as many points as they can. And I hope Carlos Sainz is able to do as much as he can in his delicate state.
Yeah, my expectations for Carlos Sainz are no different from a standard weekend. I think he can achieve what he normally would. And like you say, if you're declaring yourself fit enough to race, in my book, you are therefore fit enough to be rated versus your ordinary self. That's kind of my perspective on it. And then in terms of Ferrari, yeah, I think, McLaren are proof of last season, really, how you need to be firing on all cylinders for as large a percentage of the year as you possibly can. And McLaren are proof where if you get, if you start poorly and you give yourself too much work to do, it doesn't matter how good you end up being, you might not be able to catch the teams that you want to. Now, you might say, well, they caught Aston Martin. Sure, yeah, they did. But realistically, if they started well, they were well in that fight for second place with Mercedes and Ferrari, which they never were because of where they started. So if you are Ferrari right now, you're just looking to claim every single point that you can, to the point where if one of these other teams, it could be Mercedes, could be Aston Martin, could be McLaren, could be Alpine, maybe. One of those other teams.
Let's all get our hopes up.
Yeah, let's calm down a bit. If one of those teams, just does essentially what McLaren did last year, you've built up enough of a buffer for it not to count. So, yeah, it's important for Ferrari to strike while the iron is hot. The midfield. So at the moment, we're in a strange situation where after two races, there are 5 teams. 4 of them have no points, and 1 of them has 1 point. Did anyone have money on Haas being the one with 1 point? Anyway,
definitely not me. That's for sure.
Nah, me neither. So yeah, Haas have got 1 point thanks to Nico Hulkenberg's effort and indirectly Kevin Magnussen's effort at Saudi Arabia. But Sauber, Williams, Alpine, and that Minardi team are on zilch. So going into this race, Sam, which of these teams do you think is in a position to maybe break away from that pack and gain some good points?
It's a really tricky one because arguably none of them have shown massive progress towards point scoring positions. The only team that you'd argue that has even been remotely close to progressing is Minardi, Cash App, Visa RB, whatever they're called. And that's mostly down to Yuki Tsunoda's qualifying ability, shown, of course, for 9th place in Saudi Arabia, but the race pace doesn't look promising. Now, what has been promising is that the team have come out and said that they've noticed that there's some issues with the car. And if you can notice that the issues with the car, unlike Mercedes, if you can turn around and actually notice what they are and you understand what they are and where the design has gone wrong, and I imagine having links to Red Bull helps with that, then in theory, you can fix those. You can turn those around, or you can remove them at least. So for me, those lovely blue and white and red neon crazy coloured cars that they've got there, which is a lovely throwback, of course, to Toro Rosso, they are the ones that are the most likely to take that step forward to be the 6th team to score points. I can't see, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to, I can't see Gasly or Ocon getting anywhere near the points unless there's an absolute Australia wrecking carnage again, like we had very recently. Sauber, they believe they're the 6th fastest team. That's an absolute load of rubbish. I've never seen someone lie so blatantly to all of our faces as what Sauber did. They'll be kicking themselves for that. Get it?
Hey, it might be true if you remove Red Bull and McLaren and Ferrari.
Yes. So if we basically break the sport off into 2 separate sports, sure.
Yeah, I think they could be 6th fastest.
Great. Yeah, 6 out of 8. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Legit. And then Williams are a really tricky one. I don't think they've shown absolute pace. In Bahrain, they were both troubled with steering wheel issues, with the screen embedded into the wheel, of course, and they had issues with navigating the brake bias and things like that. And then we got to Jeddah, and they were caught up behind the absolutely flawless Haas plan, stuck behind Kevin Magnussen. They couldn't get the move done, but Alex Albon was the person next behind the Hulk. So if Alex Albon and, hopefully Logan Sargent are able to really extract the absolute maximum out of the car, then maybe they can do it. But I do think that out of all the teams that haven't scored points yet, Visa Cash App are the ones that are going to be fighting. They're going to be knocking on the door. They're going to be the ones that are able to maybe pinch a point or two if we do see some retirements in Albert Park.
Yes, I think you might be right. I think we've reached a weird spot almost where It feels like in qualifying, there really is not a lot to choose between the entire field, including these 5 teams. But at least in terms of race trim, then the gaps seem to appear a little bit more. Now, naturally, you're going over, 50, 60, 70 laps. So, of course, if there is a 1/10 or 2/10 advantage for a team, that is going to spread itself out across the length of a full race. But even so, it does feel like there is a very much a 2 class or maybe 3 class if you want to put Red Bull in its own class, but almost like it's split down the middle, right? Where the gap between Aston Martin in 5th and anyone else in 6th down to 10th does seem to be quite large. So naturally, 5 teams, 10 drivers, it doesn't give all that much in terms of opportunity. Obviously, Hulkenberg and Magnussen had to work so hard to get 1 point. It's not like they had to pull off that strategy to try and get a 5th place finish, which might have been the case in previous years where, it was a bit closer maybe. Now it feels like these strategies are, and they're almost fighting for scraps, a point, maybe 2 points at most. And I don't know, to me, it feels like there's only 2 ways in which, or 2 main ways in which more opportunities for bigger points are going to come about for these teams. Number one, reliability issues, which there haven't been any yet for the top 5 teams. And number 2, and I really don't enjoy going in on this guy, but Lance Stroll is the other one because he is very clearly the weak link of those top 10 drivers.
Proved it in Jeddah, right?
He proved it, yeah, of course he did. And of course, Bahrain was not his fault in any way whatsoever. But Jeddah, but I think that's almost proving the point, is that in Bahrain, Lance Stroll was able to recover back to 10th after that start. So where you have got Fernando Alonso and 4 teams full of 2 good drivers, that, if you're saying Piastri might be the second weakest driver, maybe in the top 10, it's a pretty strong top 10. That might be the second way in which another team gets an opportunity. I agree with you that I think the Minardi team is probably best positioned in this, in that, yes, Yuki Tsunoda had a good qualifying effort in Jeddah, and it feels like it just needs to be converted into something. I am pretty certain that Yuki Tsunoda has spent 95% of his life in F1 in 2024 behind Kevin Magnussen.
He's surgically attached to the back of that Haas at the moment.
Pretty much. I think it's frustrating because that I do think that Minardi, at least in Bahrain, had the pace to get by Kevin Magnussen. And I mean, we don't really know what was the true test of pace in Saudi Arabia, but it does feel like they have more than what they're able to show, at least right now. If Yuki Tsunoda, for example, if the first stage of that race had just gone a little bit better for him, because he qualified well, he qualified roughly where Hamilton qualified. Let's say he gets out in front of that group, he's got a really easy 9th place. I'm not saying he would have competed with the other drivers in that mix, but he'd have been well clear of that battle that he was in, because it just seems to be the case that they haven't got the outright pace to get the overtakes on these guys, but they would have enough pace to outclass them if they weren't in that mix. So I think they have the biggest opportunity, I would say. I would say with Williams is an interesting one, because I do think Alex Albon went well in Saudi Arabia. I think he had okay pace. But I just don't know. I mean, he was just stuck behind Kevin Magnussen again for so long that it's difficult to tell where his true pace was. Bear in mind, at Australia last year, he was very good. He was very good. And you might say, well, it was a chaotic race and Alex Albon might have been on course for points, but that was because of the chaos. No, bear in mind, he was in a really good spot way before the chaos of last year at Albert Park. And that was the location where, for me at least, it felt, I know they got a point in Bahrain or something like that, but it felt like to me last year, Australia was the proof that the Williams, maybe track specific, but could fight. They need something like that this season, because we haven't had it yet. And I don't know whether it will be this weekend. But I think if Alex Albon, who's qualifying okay, if he can just maybe do what Hulkenberg's done, just get into a Q3, or what Yuki Tsunoda has done, scrape into that top 10 and hold on to position, because that Williams is still pretty quick in a straight line, then maybe that's where it comes about. So I'm less confident about Williams, but I feel like it's almost quite a big weekend for them.
Am I mad for saying that I think now with the added DRS zones around Albert Park, that there are actually some similarities between Jeddah and Albert Park? There's a lot of fast-flowing mid-speed corners, quite perilous straight lines with difficult overtaking zones at the end of them. There's every chance that if Albon qualifies well, you're right, maybe he could just about hold on to the position he starts in. So maybe it is all to do on the Saturday. And remember, folks, we are on qualifying Saturday, race on Sunday this time.
Good point. Are we running with 3 DRS zones or 4?
Start, finish straight. Second straight after the thingy-mabob, the chicane. And then we've got the DRS zone up to the, turn 12 or whatever it is, turn 11. And then we've got the DRS zone after as well, I think.
Did they cut one last year? I can't remember. I feel like the plan was going to be there. Yeah, I feel like last year maybe, or the year before, there was the plan that it was going to be 4 DRS zones, and then in the end they took away one of them. But I don't know whether it is back to 4 now. It's point stands anyway. It's quite a heavily DRS'd circuit.
Article released on the 14th of March declares that currently, anyway, it has 4 DRS zones.
Damn.
So we'll see. We'll see how legit that is. Of course, we might get to the race weekend itself, and they might announce that there is only 3. But we are recording that before the weekend.
4? That's
4,
insane.
Jeremy. 4 DRS zones. That's insane.
A quick note on Alpine, who didn't really touch on a great deal there. At least Esteban Ocon was able to get in the fight, and his positive from the race was essentially, we could see where our weakness was because we were actually in direct contact with other teams, which in itself is sad as hell, but might be quite accurate right now as to where they are. Do you think that if they can't capitalize on another Magnussen train or similar, that they might become detached again, or have they maybe turned a little bit of a corner?
No, the only corner they're turning is the one on the racetrack. They are not close enough to that team, to any team in front of them. I really do think they have the worst car at the moment, and I think the only reason they were within any chance of a fight, nowhere near points, any chance of a fight, and commendations to Ocon, was because Kevin Magnussen was driving around at 3 seconds a lap slower. I'm not saying that the Alpine is so slow that naturally on the pace they're 3 seconds a lap slower and they need someone to be driving like that just to stay in touch. But I do think at a track like Albert Park, where mid-speed... This is why Mercedes often do quite well around here, because mid-speed corners are very prevalent here. And we all know that their engine isn't fantastic either, so if they're not riding through a DRS train and they've got to punch their own hole through the air, I just think they're going to struggle. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if this is as bad, if not worse, than Bahrain for them. I really do think that Haas's strategy made them... It covered their blushes a little bit, I think, in Saudi Arabia. I think it allowed them to look a lot better than they actually were. Combined with Esteban Ocon driving a superb and kind of... people underestimated just how good that performance was to maintain himself in that train. When you look at how well Ricciardo did, not very. You look at kind of where both the Saubers were at the end, not great. You look at where Yuki Tsunoda ended up, not good at all. Ocon in a car that was slower than all of those did a really, really good job, and I think he was the only saving grace for them. I think it's going to be a really difficult time for them this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right with what you say about Esteban Ocon. He, for a team that's going so badly, he really did give it everything he had in Saudi Arabia and put together a great performance. I mean, all 3 of us gave him great credit on our Power Rankings episode that you can listen to now via our Patreon. The link is in the description.
Very good.
Yeah, I love that. But yeah, I think he did genuinely do a very good job. I am worried. Last year at this race, the 2 Alpine drivers crashed into each other. I don't think it's going to be better than that.
Yeah, I saw a very funny meme, folks. Here you go. I'm going to try and describe a meme to you when you're
meme.
on a meme when you're on a podcast. But it's if you ever watched Top Gear, the original trio of the British Top Gear, there's a sketch that they did when they drove around Paris in French cars, and it was about Richard Hammond parking his car, and he said, if I was an English person, I'd go, well, I can't fit my car there, but I'm not. I'm a French person, so I'm just going to drive my car into here, and he's repeatedly just hitting other people's cars in the street, but it's fine because French people don't care about their cars. Anyway, that audio is playing over Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon crashing each other into the wall at the Australian Grand Prix. So they've got previous here of just smashing up French automobiles. There's every chance that if they're right at the back together, maybe they'll just do it to get rid of their race early or for some entertainment, just to get some airtime. Who knows?
Think of the people. Think of the people.
The French love thinking of the people.
Bold predictions. Unless you can tell me otherwise, Harry sacrifices any possibility of a point because he hasn't submitted one.
I would almost argue that we vote for a -1, but he's not here to condone that. I do feel like that should be a group decision.
Do you have any defense to that, Harry? No. All right.
Can't
Guess
quite
it's
hear him.
-1.
Maybe he's shouting from the plane.
Gave him the opportunity. What's your bold prediction?
After all the slander we have given throughout this podcast, and I guess this is why it's bold, I'm going to say that Lance Stroll will beat Fernando Alonso.
Sure. That counts as bold.
Nice and simple, nice and easy, but very, very difficult to achieve.
I don't know. I feel like I've tried to go really bold, but sensibly bold with my first two, and it hasn't worked because if you've been keeping score, folks, I have 0 points after 2 races. So rather than actually think about it, I'm just going to go with something really bold, like Logan Sargent will score a point.
Love that. Yeah, bold, and it won't happen, so we'll all still be here on 0-0.
The first 2 bold predictions, I gave some good reasons as to why I think they might happen, and they weren't too far off happening. Here, no rhyme or reason. If you're looking for an answer why this will happen, I don't have one. I just need a point, and I'm going for something different.
In Bahrain, was your bold prediction that Haas would score points?
Yep.
And then you said, if they don't do it, I'm never going to do it again. And then they did it the next Grand Prix.
Yep.
That only twigged me earlier on in the week when I was just thinking about this. I thought, you predicting it a race early. That's really funny.
Yep. I'm not wrong, just early.
Hey, there's much worse things that you could be in life.
Early breaking, new spin-off series. Pole 1, 2, 3. What have you got?
Pole, Max Verstappen. The wing, Max Verstappen. Second place, I've gone for Sergio Perez. And third place, let's say the experiments work, George Russell.
Sure, why not? You can almost copy and paste. I've given Leclerc pole position the first 2 times, and I've been wrong both times. So I'm actually abandoning you on this one, God Leclerc. Apologies, but Max Verstappen seems to be quite good at the qualifying. Shocker, really. Yeah. So I've got Verstappen pole, Verstappen win, Perez second, but I'll give Charles Leclerc third place. Ciao, Albert.
Nice. Third place is his home now.
Yeah. It's his first place, isn't it?
Yeah, he's just knocked up a little front door, put some flowers out the front, ring the doorbell at number 3, and there is Charles Leclerc.
There he is. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Under pressure time. As we always do ahead of a Grand Prix weekend, we determine who or what is under pressure for this particular race weekend. And as always, we have some Discord submissions that we will get through in a moment's time. But before we do, Sam, from your perspective, who or what's under pressure?
Who or what? I like that. A what? We've spoken about them a lot, and I just gave his teammate a podium in my predictions, as much as I think it is quite bold. But Lewis Hamilton is my man under pressure. He's been beaten both in qualifying and in the race by George Russell for the first 2 races, and he does not historically go particularly well at Albert Park. Yes, okay, he got a podium a couple of times in the last couple of races, but in terms of outright performance, he's only ever won here twice. And you've got to think about how many races that Lewis Hamilton has won. He's only won here in 2008 and 2015. So it is not a good circuit for him historically. And I do think the combination of the car not performing, him being outdriven by his teammate, outqualified by his teammate at a circuit that historically is not his favourite, he has got to step up. Otherwise, he's on holiday until he goes to Ferrari at this point. That's what it feels like anyway. So under pressure, Lewis Hamilton, your season starts right here, sir.
So if he wins by some weird logic, he will win the championship, right? If he's only won there twice,
yes,
on both occasions he's won the title.
That makes some kind of sense, but also he's won more titles than he's won at Albert Park.
Sure. Never mind. Good. I'm going with a team. I'm going with Aston Martin, and the reason I think they're under pressure is that whilst this Verstappen saga continues, and whilst Mercedes still have an open seat for 2025, there is, I think, a lot of pressure on Aston Martin to prove themselves to Fernando Alonso. I do not believe it's the other way around. And look, for reasons that we've discussed plenty of times on this podcast, they're sticking with Lance Stroll, but they aren't stupid enough to know. They aren't stupid enough that they understand having Lance Stroll in one side of the team means you need a very good driver on the other side of the team, at least to get to where they want to go. And Fernando Alonso is that. But Aston Martin, at least at the moment, they're not making progress. They are further behind than where they were a year ago. They're further behind than where they were sort of June of last year, I'd say. They're probably on a par with where they were for most of the second half of last season. But Fernando Alonso, he's not patient, and nor should he be. He's not going to wait around for it staying the same. He is going to want to see that team progress. At the moment, they're not. They need at some point to show that they have at least a pace to compete properly with Mercedes and McLaren, and ideally even more than that. But Alonso has said himself, we're a couple of attempts behind these teams, and one of those teams has an opening.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Fernando Alonso, you might be in the sport only for another 15, 20 years. So you've got to strike while the iron is hot, and you've got to get yourself into a championship winning seat because he's thirsty for it.
Who retires first? Ollie Behrman or Fernando Alonso?
Ollie Behrman.
Yeah, it's probably a fair bet, actually. Right, that's who we're saying is under pressure. But as promised, we have some Discord submissions.
Now, folks, fingers crossed that this works. I've had to do a lot of muting. You'll have heard some Discord notifications at the start of this episode. That was me. Sorry. So we're going to start off with Beef from a land down under, is what she said. What has she got to say about the Australian Grand Prix?
Hello. Huge life update. Beef is getting glasses because apparently I can't see. So that was crazy.
Blind Beef.
Glasses reveal will be in the Discord by the end of the week. Anything else? I had a wonderful St. Patrick's Day. Great. I might have had a few too many drinks. Whoopsie. Under pressure. Daniel Ricciardo. Just do anything for your home GP. Okay, bye.
Where we go. So we've got Blind Beef, who is not Irish, but got very, very drunk on St. Patrick's Day.
And thinks Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, at least she's given an F1 answer this time, so I think that's a step in the right direction.
Under 30 seconds as well. She's ticked a couple of boxes.
Nice one, Beef. Do you see Alan Jones had some interesting comments about Daniel Ricciardo?
I did not. What did he say about Daniel Ricciardo?
You're over the hill, mate.
Oh!
Not though, that's paraphrasing, but
he's
essentially
not the biggest fan of Daniel Ricciardo's current talent then?
No, not so much.
Ooh, I mean, Daniel Ricciardo's only got to prove himself to himself and the fellow Red Bull board, I suppose, and he doesn't have to give a Scooby what Alan Jones says.
Sorry, Alan.
I mean, hey, it would matter to me what he says, but I don't think Daniel Ricciardo's probably too bothered. We move on to a game that I have to be very careful about how I say it, and I think it's a first-timey submission. So you've really made me.
Not.
Is it not?
No, I think you missed out on this person's first submission.
It's a first-timey for me. Great. This is late master breaking. Oh, why have you done that to me? Here we go.
Under pressure this week is probably Alpine, and they've got all the straight line speed of me on the toilet, which it's not a lot. It's not a lot.
Sensational submission from late master breaking.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. Yeah, people don't tend to move forwards on the toilet, so you're best placed where you are when you go. Well done.
Sure. Been to the Sam Sage School of Analogies.
That's true. It's a good one. Well done. We'll move on to Crash Override, whose submission is Tartar Woof. So we'll see what this relates to.
What's up, boys? Crash Override, coming from the land of the free and home of Dale Earnhardt. This week's Under Pressure for the Australian Grand Prix has to be Toto Wolff. He better figure it out if he wants to land the big fish Max Verstappen. Okay, bye.
Now, was that a diss at a Cockney accent?
I don't know.
Toto Wolff.
Oh man, I like Total Wolf going fishing though. That's great.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, fair as well. The man has come up with a lot of comments and doesn't know what way he's meant to be walking at the moment. So fair. Okay, dribbling Shiitake up next.
Alpine are under pressure this week. That is if they want to walk away with the wooden spoon at the end of the year, which they clearly do. Stiff competition coming from the likes of R&DB, from Bills Racing, and from Kick Sauber in the Vag. Those acronyms throw some people in the Volkswagen Auto Group. And submission of the week, Hunt for Red October. Have a good one, boys. Keep up the good work.
Well, we're going to have to cut that one.
Great. That's editing work for me. Good.
Okay, coming up next is going to be Hammer Time Lewis. Or is it? Yes.
I've got two drivers for under pressure this week, Daniel Ricciardo and Logan Sargent. I mean, the Minardi and the Williams aren't exactly front of the field teams, but you can't be finishing near those John Deere tractors that Alpine has dressed up as race cars and expect to keep your seat.
Ouch.
There's too much talent coming up with contracts, and there's just too much young talent. They've got to show up or get out. Love the show. Keep breaking late.
Love that. Forgot to mention that the new CEO of Alpine was the Wurzels, and they've decided to run their combine harvesters.
Way.
America. Mainly America, because I feel like this would be so weird for you guys. Listen to the Wurzels. If you've heard of them, I'll be surprised.
Me too.
I mean, the rest of the world is quite normal, but America, I don't know. Cool. Right, MLG Shark.
Hello, everyone. Shark here. For this Australian Grand Prix, I believe Daniel Ricciardo is under pressure, just because he's on the team to beat Yuki Tsunoda, and Yuki Tsunoda so far is beating him. So we'll see if he can switch things around.
Yep, totally fair. Had a few shots for Daniel Ricciardo now. The man needs a good result.
Typically struggles here as well.
So typical of Australians not to do it at their home Grand Prix. There really is a curse.
Weird,
now,
isn't it?
Isn't there? Really is an Aussie curse at their home Grand Prix. I bet it'll be gutted. I'm sure Mark Webber will be gutted as well if his now protege ends up being the first Aussie to really do well here.
Yeah, true.
Okay, this is Guilherme Pasley.
Fantastic.
I love a swap of initials. You should do it to my name, folks.
Under pressure for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is still Alpine. Okay, guys, you're a works team. Let's look like it, yeah?
I mean,
Great idea.
yeah, it's a fact. It's a great shout. The fact that you make your own engines and everything else. Maybe you should get good.
Scrub.
All Good Always is back.
Hi,
Yes.
Breaking. It has been a long while. I'm back. I took a little break from the Discord, focused on work, but now I'm back for submissions for 2024. Australian Grand Prix under pressure gotta be the Honey Badger. I mean, Danny Rick, it's your home race. Please score some points. Anyway, love you guys. Love the podcast. Bye.
She almost got a bit of a boy in there, which is a very
Boy.
late, it's very late breaking to say goodbye like that. Something I would like to address here is the focusing on work to get away from the Discord. It's not something we condone here.
Nope.
Late breaking comes first.
Yep.
So all good always. I expect you to be fired by next week. This is a joke for legal reasons. It's our favourite West Countryer. It's Bristol Liam.
Right, lads. Walking from the Barbers, just got a buzz next to a loud road, so sorry about quality. My under pressure for this week is the NASCAR Stake F1 team pit crew, because they cannot do a good pit stop to save their lives. 52 seconds in Bahrain, 30 odd seconds in Jeddah. Sort yourselves out, you green things. Bye.
Hey, they're improving, all right?
You're greeting things. I bet it's just because under the pit crew's masks, it's people like Drake trying to do the tyres as a marketing campaign.
They'll be under 5 seconds by, I don't know, Brazil.
Great. Good stuff. Sounds like a promising year for them. And to round us off is going to be Roof.
Hope everybody's doing well. It's Lee all the way from South Africa. Under pressure this week. It's myself. I don't know if I will be able to watch Australia. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. And all the times is bad for me, but this one is terrible. And especially this is going to be like a snooze fest. Anyhow, I hope you guys do well in your bold predictions. And then everybody is under pressure except Max. And Alpine. Does Alpine even do the Formula One anymore? I don't know. But yeah. Bye.
It was said with such
love that.
authenticity as well.
Blanket under pressure for everyone who's not Max Verstappen.
I mean, not wrong. They get a step up.
Sure.
Yeah, they get a step
Makes
up.
sense.
It's a good suggestion there. Load of great lists there. And if you do want to get involved in the future, then get involved in the Discord. The link's in the description. And you can get involved in our submissions channel where we will ask very quickly after the race. So we'll be doing one straight after the Australia Grand Prix where we will send out, well, you've got about 15 minutes to get your submission in after the Grand Prix if you'd like to be featured on the podcast.
Good stuff. Moving on. So some comments here, as referenced by Toto Wolff, regarding Red Bull's dominance. He had the following to say: "I don't want to fall in the trap of a fellow team principal from next door in 2014 and 2015 who said we should change the regs because it's too dominant. I think Red Bull have done by far the best job of all the teams over the last 2 years, and credit where credit is due. I mean, they are literally disappearing in the distance as they want, and there's nobody else close. It's just that they are in a different league, and our sport is an honest sport. The best performance is being rewarded from car, from machine, and man." So essentially here, Christian Horner, who of course had some question marks about the regulations at the time of Mercedes dominance about 10 years ago, felt that maybe the regulations should be looked at. Toto Wolff, not, as he puts it, falling into the same trap. What did you think of these comments?
I feel like Toto Wolff has been quite coy here, and whilst trying to sound PR positive to maybe someone who isn't paying a lot of attention, sure, you might go, oh, good for you, Toto, move on with your day. But I think if you break down his comment, he is very sneakily essentially doing what Christian Horner and the Red Bull team did before the regulations were changed and Red Bull came into kind of that top tier that they're in now. When you say, I don't want to take on the same actions that our counterpart did when we were dominating, you're essentially saying, I'm bringing up the topic of the fact that someone spoke about one team being too dominant and that the regulations need to be changed without actually saying a team is too dominant and I want the regulations to be changed, especially with his comment paired at the end, which was they're literally disappearing off into the distance at will and no one around them is close to catch them. Without saying change the regulations to make the sport closer, you have essentially said immediately, we should change the regulations so there's more competition, so there's another car that can catch them. Red Bull are doing a fantastic job, and I've always been a firm believer that the team at the front are doing things brilliantly. They're doing exactly what they need to do. They're winning at the sport, and you shouldn't have to bend and break and change the rules just to make it competitive again. You're all equally intelligent. You've all now got the same budget. And yes, there is the argument that, of course, before the cost cap was introduced, everyone's equipment should have been brought up to the same standard. But nonetheless, teams like Ferrari, teams like Mercedes could and arguably should be right there with them, and they're not. So, Toto, you've tried to be clever here, and I feel like actually you've just come out sounding exactly like almost like I'd rather you just be honest and come out and say, we should change the regulations because we can't catch them. And if you want a competitive, fun sport to watch for everyone, then something's going to need to be done about it. That's what I feel like he's done. And maybe I'm being Mr. Negative, I don't know, but it does just feel like he's come out and said, oh, I don't want to moan. Inadvertently, he's moaning.
It is an interesting one because I understand what you're saying, where Toto Wolff is essentially saying, look, I don't want to be like these comments from 10 years ago. And most people would be like, oh yeah, I forgot about those comments from 10 years ago. Thanks for bringing it back up. Yeah. Because I think if you asked a lot of people who were fans at the time, do you remember Christian Horner saying something like this? They'd go, oh, yeah, I remember him saying something along those lines. But it's not something you would bring up organically, which, of course, Toto Wolff has done. So I understand what you're getting at here. I think regardless of the intention of his words, I think his words are true in that Red Bull are dominating, and ultimately that's not Red Bull's fault. And I don't think regulations should ever be changed with the idea of stopping one particular team. And look, I mean, the regulations were changed with that in mind. I mean, the regulations that came in a couple of years ago were based on trying to achieve greater parity in the sport. Now, that wasn't necessarily aimed at one specific team, although the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull were certainly targeted more. But that's only because they were spending more. That's essentially what they were going after, was any team who spent more than what the cost cap currently is. So you could argue, you know, those regulations have already changed to try and make the sport more even, which in my eyes just makes what Red Bull are doing even more impressive. Now, I think Verstappen, was it 20 of the last 21 races, 19 of the last 20 races, whatever
Something
we're
like
up to
that,
now.
yeah.
I mean, that is, I think we have reached the point where it is unprecedented dominance by definitely a driver, but maybe for a team as well. And I don't want to disrespect what Mercedes did in 2014 and 2015, or Ferrari did in 2001 and 2002, or McLaren did in the late 80s. All of those periods of dominance have been thoroughly impressive. But in all of those instances, each team could spend whatever the hell they wanted to. And they did. I mean, Mercedes were winning in 2014 and 2015, and they were outspending their rivals incredibly comfortably, with the exception of Ferrari. Even Red Bull weren't spending the amount that Mercedes were back then. Now, and I appreciate the cost cap is not perfect. It's a long, long way from perfect. There are things not included, as you say, Sam, already, about the equipment not being up to the same standard going into this new era. Completely get that. But even in a slightly less than perfect cost cap world, what they've been able to do and maintaining such dominance under those conditions, and it's not just the cost cap, the wind tunnel time, which I appreciate they had even less of than they were supposed to, thanks to the penalty they had for breaking the cost cap. And look, I mean, I was very clear at the time of the cost cap as well that I thought the punishment should be way, way harsher. But let's not pretend that they spent 300 million or 200 million. Like, they overspent by 10 million, which I think should still have come down as a far harsher penalty. But it's not like they spent masses and masses above what they should have done. And I think it's just overall incredibly impressive what they're doing, and it's up to the other teams to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Christian Horner came out and said last year, you haven't even seen the full effects of our reduced wind tunnel time yet, and they've come into 2024, and
When we seeing it?
yeah, is it later? Is it coming soon?
Now yet?
Is it
Not
happening now? Is the reduction in wind tunnel time in the room with us? Because I can't see it.
Adrian Newey a wind tunnel?
I mean, he may as well be, for the fact that he can understand physics in the way that he does. Yeah, I think the only question mark, of course, as you already brought up, is the cost cap. They spent over by about 10 million, and everyone, I think, who's listening to this has every right to go, they did break the rules, and you are very much right to bring that up. I think you are perfectly entitled to raise that up. Do you logically think, and Ben, I pose the question to you as well, do you logically think that the 10 million that they overspent across their entire organisation, that's everything that was sat within that cost cap requirement, led them to being 30 seconds faster over an entire race? Do you think that's 10 million's worth of time?
No. Let's boil this down as well, right? This is the easiest way I can probably, and this is an on-the-fly analogy, so it might not be the absolute best one. But let's say both me and Sam are, let's go with Bristol Liam's example. We're barbers, right? We're cutting people's hair. And a customer's come to you and giving you £14 to cut their hair, and you've done an okay job. Like, fine.
Sounds about right for me.
But another customer's come to me and given me £14.80 to do it. So 80p more, and I have delivered the absolute best possible haircut. Because that's what we're talking about here. It's not like, again, Red Bull didn't, and I've used those numbers quite specifically because it was something along the lines of 140 million versus 148 million or something like that. So I've kind of tried to boil it down to smaller numbers, but that kind of is what we're talking here. It's not like they went masses and masses beyond. Look, and to be clear, this isn't me saying that we should just chuck it under the bridge and it wasn't worth the time. I 100% wanted them to come down harder on this because it was a clear breach of what they should have done. But if you're asking me, do I think it had a huge impact on performance? I don't. No.
Yeah, I think the other way. Great haircut analogy. Love that. Really up my street, that is. The other way that I could see it working out is if you were to give every other team bar Red Bull and say to them, you can now spend the X million that Red Bull overspent, and they don't get that, but you do, to catch up the difference.
Well, there you go.
Do I think that Ferrari would be on absolute parity of what Red Bull are achieving? No, I don't. I don't think that extra, 8 point whatever it was million that they spent would close the gap to Red Bull. I don't think they have the engineering knowledge. I don't think they've got the prowess to do it. And it's the same with McLaren. It's the same with Mercedes or anyone else. I think that whilst the bang for their buck was illegal, the bang for their buck was extreme. And they have delivered absolute maximum extraction of performance for the money that they've spent.
Hard to argue with it. Okay, everyone, welcome back to the final part of today's episode where we have a game of fact or crap. Now, of course, no soundboard in place here, so I don't know, we picked a game that doesn't really have much of a jingle. That works out. Fact or crap. Fairly simple concept. There are 3 statements in front of me here, and myself and Sam are just going to determine, are they fact, are they crap? You'll get the gist of this pretty quickly. Let's start with this. And this is an interesting idea that I've seen a few occasions since the 10 seconds, 5 seconds debacle for time penalties in a Grand Prix. Penalties should be done by positions rather than time.
Oh, that's almost too vague for me to absolutely be able to comfortably agree with. Because no, I don't agree. I think that's crap. I think time is how we've always done things in racing. It's how things have always been measured. And I think, yeah.
Well, I guess similar to a grid penalty, and rather than the starting grid, you're determining where someone finishes in a race.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go with crap. But I think someone could sit down with me for half an hour and present a good argument, and I could be swayed.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I get it, but it does directly answer the question of, drivers being penalized fairly almost. We have mentioned on previous episodes how time can sometimes not be applied equally. And this is quite a good example where we're going into the Australian Grand Prix. You'll remember last year, Carlos Sainz had a 5-second time penalty that essentially saw him lose. I don't remember how many positions it was, but he should have finished quite comfortably inside the top 10. But because there was a late race safety car where everyone was, together on that final lap, that 5 seconds cost him points. And equally, we've seen it the other way as well, where drivers are happy to take 5 seconds because they know that they'll make it back. This does answer that, but I'm still going to go with crap. I'd rather a different solution other than outright position.
I also think it removes a lot of the jeopardy. If you know that you're losing, 3 places, you don't need to drive any faster to get away, nor do you need to worry about maybe trying to, pull out a certain gap. You're like, right, the car in front of me is 10 seconds in front, and I can't close that down in, 10 laps. So I'm losing 3 places regardless, so I just sit there.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Okay, next one on fact or crap. There will be at least 3 rookies on the grid next year.
Ooh.
And I will allow Liam Lawson as a rookie.
Okay. So I think, Behrman deserves a seat. Lawson, I think, will get a seat. I think someone else, maybe Antonelli, depends who steps up in F2, of course, who's got the links, it massively helps. I think it's a stretch. I think 2 is almost guarantee. I think 3 is a push, but I'm going to say fact, there's enough talent that should be on its way out of Formula 1, and I do think the junior formulas are at a very, very strong period that they deserve chances to happen.
Now, as a bit of a teaser, folks, I think in a future episode we might well look to do a what do we think the 2025 grid is going to look like. So you'll get a clearer idea there as to whether we think this is actually is going to be fact or crap. I'm going to say fact if we're including Liam Lawson in this, which I think is fair given, he only had a couple of races. Yeah, I think Lawson will be there. I think Behrman will be there. And then, like you say, it's just got to be one other driver, whether that is Antonelli, whether that is Jack Doohan possibly, or Teo Pourchaire, or I don't know, maybe Minardi go bold and they bring in 2 rookies. I don't know, but I do think one way or another we do get to 3. So I'll go fact.
A name that's fallen out of popularity, Dennis Hauger. That had a lot of people putting him in for a seat and kind of has dropped off the popularity list recently.
Yeah, I think he's somewhat underwhelmed as soon as he got to F2, which is probably a large part of it. But yeah, there was a time where the Red Bull Junior program was looking very good. And I had a look the other day at all of the Red Bull Junior drivers, and it doesn't quite look as promising as it did a couple of years ago, potentially. The last one might involve a little bit of thought, but I've seen this opinion come about a bit. Carlos Sainz is the best driver ever to lose his seat.
Oh.
We'll take, because you could say, for example, Alain Prost being fired. I think we'll put that to one side. Like a driver losing their seat because another driver was favoured for performance reasons almost.
Yeah. Did Montoya just leave?
Yeah. Bit interesting ground.
Yeah, that was kind of the name that springs to mind as maybe it's the other one. Yeah, are any names springing out to you? I can't think of any. I think I have to say fact unless you bring up a fair argument.
I've got a very close one, and I am actually going to say crap to this because whilst right now I think I would put Sainz ahead of this guy, not by a lot, but I would put Sainz ahead of this guy. I feel like Sergio Perez being dropped from Force India at that point was a better driver than what Carlos Sainz is now. Not by much, but I would just about go with Perez as being a better driver. And maybe there are other examples as well, but I essentially went that far back and thought, not quite. So
it's a really good question. No, I'm going to still stick with Sainz. I think factually, I would want to have Sainz in my team. A full quality Sainz over full quality Perez. I would choose Sainz. I guess you have to base it on their form when they're losing their seat, I suppose. But
it's close.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sainz. I'm going to say fact.
Fair enough. Interesting to hear all of your thoughts, as always, on those 3 bits. And indeed, that last one's a very interesting one. So let us know whether you think that is fact or crap. I think that'll do it for this preview episode. The good news, though, Sam, is that we're back twice later this week.
Yeah, twice, because we don't just do a race review anymore. No, we do a qualifying review as well. So if you're thinking, oh, well, I just like a little catch-up in between the sessions, well, we're going to be here for you after that Saturday session. So make sure you're tuning. And if you're thinking, oh, it's only Wednesday when I'm listening to this, I'd love some more content in between that, go and check out the Patreon. It really isn't very expensive, and you do not realise just how much it helps this show to continue growing. We know that we're a bit silly and we can take the mickey sometimes, and we're not full with aerodynamic excellence when it comes to that knowledge, but we hope we give you a little something different and a laugh. And so if you do like it, you want to support it, that is the best way to do so. Make sure to leave 5-star reviews. Harry will want me to say that. Get in the description, the links in the description. In the Discord, the links in the description, what I meant to say. That's the one. Late Breaking F1 for social media everywhere and on YouTube, as this has been videoed as well. We appreciate your support. We love you very much. And we'll be back at the weekend for a full weekend full of Formula One. We can't wait. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
And I've been Ben Hocking. And remember, keep breaking late.
Bye.